Hi, I'm Marcus Fayers, founder and editor-in-chief of Dezeen, and welcome to day 2 of Dezeen 15, a digital festival celebrating Dezeen's 15th birthday. We asked 15 creators from around the world to come up with ideas for how to change the world over the next 15 years. Over the coming days, they'll be presenting their manifestos and showing us how they think they can make the world a better place. And today we're speaking to architect Winy Maas about his proposal. Hi, Winy.
Hi, Marcus. Nice to meet each other. Congratulations, 15 years.
Yeah, we're feeling like the old dog on the block now.
Well,
where are you speaking from today, Winy?
I'm speaking from the office. I just came from the depot that's opening these days. So with a lot of crowd, a lot of which is nice. But now this is more safe for to discuss as a place. But you're welcome next time in the depot in Rotterdam.
Tell us about the depot, because I know that we've struggled to find time in your schedule today because you're launching a pretty important building that you've designed. Tell us about it.
It's the first bigger, say, public archive of art in the world. There's a small one in Basel, in the Schouwlager, and I always see the Soane's Museum also in London as an art depot somehow. But this is the first public one in a larger format that it's opened. In the middle of the city of Rotterdam. It is where it stores collections of public and private sectors in one building, and where it also combines that with some kind of curatorial potential out of that in different, say, galleries and in between spaces. And I think you got some of the images of it. It's in the middle of the park next to the Kunsthal and the NAI, and it's a giant, say, bowl of mirrors that reflect the city and shows the collection of buildings of Rotterdam and adds that to the collection of art inside as a metaphor and as a way of dealing with this combination, and also to express that because it's positioned in the middle of a park, that the park continues visually.
And the park continues literally on top of the building, right? Because it's covered in trees.
Completely, with a pavilion inside where to eat and to dance in the evening. So it's open. Also, you can say the night of the museum is celebrated over there.
Well, talking about trees, I think this brings us nicely on to your manifesto proposal. Do you want to share your screen and tell us about your idea that could change the world in the next 15 years?
It's more than 15 years, what I will show, but we have to start somewhere, no? That is what you consider. I hope you can see the screen. I will go to the first slide.
Yeah.
That's your slide, correct?
Yeah. It's a reminder of why we're here.
Okay, so I don't have to say anything. Oh,
no.
Congratulations. And
happy birthday. Yeah.
And the very good concept of trying to think about the world as a totality. I appreciate that you dedicate your birthday to that in
Thank you.
The wider spirit. I called it the manifesto because I think you and also many people like the kind of direct concepts as such, and which is about space and about the planet. And I call it the sponge for the moment. And that's a dream of solving climate changes and growth of populations in one go, you would say, and to imagine a kind of planet where all the species can be together and produce what they need and somehow and somehow what kind of space could that be? It starts with, of course, this desire to the planet as a design object, to plead for that, and more people are doing that, and you have some on the list, and that to make this spaceship Earth into a good vessel is what I want to stress. I look back a little bit to a while ago when I wrote this book, KM3, which was about density. But also like about the tendencies of the planet. On one hand, you see indeed the growth of population, the coming 15 years for sure, the coming say 60 years still for sure. Afterwards, it might tame down, and a decrease of amount of space, not only because of urbanization, but also because of the desertification of space, of the saltification of space, which distracts say sweet water over the planet, and so there's quite a gap. This gap has to deal with many things, as I described in the graph, and but sometimes we try to measure that gap by our footprint, and that this is our cute vintage diagrams on like what the ecological footprint means. So we behave with our cars, energy demand, with our consumption pattern, with the products that we consume, more than actually the optimum ecological footprint per person could allow us for. So you can see how certain continents and certain countries are much higher in their demand than actually their surface is giving. So that means basically also if you do that per country, and you see that we already need so about like 4 United States to compensate their activities. And if you do that for the whole planet, and we would behave like such kind of countries like the US, then we need quite some planets to compensate that. So we're on a kind of a mission to or to extend the planet, or to extend, would I say, the porosity of the planet. And especially that will give more length to breathe, more shelter, more shadow, and more protection. How to do that? I think at that moment is thinking about what are, say, possible, if not impossible, worlds. And that is a subject that more and more people are trying to explore. But still, I would like to show some of those speculations with you. So I'll give you an example, because these speculations have many, like, say, tools that cover the planetary business. One is, say, borders in this case, or migration and economical potential. So if we open up our borders, imagine that would be imaginable. And we have at the moment a certain kind of GDP per capita in the US. Compare that with China or with Sierra Leone. Then there is a tendency that with opening borders, that people search for places where they can earn a little bit more. So in the end, if you would balance that in a very simplistic way, this equilibration would mean that the US would become bigger, would get the same size as China, basically, to compensate that. China would stay more or less the same as it is now, and Sierra Leone would be quite empty to compensate this GDP per capita comparison. I know it's silly, but on the other hand, it's funny what the density would mean. You see the film that how the polarity of the world would be somehow manifested as it is now. People would go to Europe, to Asia, to the US, to pieces of South America, and to pieces of Australia and New Zealand. Finally, with this graph, and it's a while ago that we made this, shows that the Netherlands becomes the highest density of the planet at that moment, with a population which is the same as Germany now on that chart. So there was a task and a mission for me here to address that to the politicians in order to open it. Afterwards, I think Merkel did a better job on this. Another way of considering about that, say, that changeable planet, that is also in that case about optimization, its positions of program to do that. So I do examples which are, say, beyond the climatic one in this case, because I think there's a whole package to deal with it. So in the case of, say, imagining energy, for instance, wind energies, these are the best ones in the world to deal with in the white lines, to put our windmills in the nearby future. And if we do that also with solar sources, then this is the map where that covers basically, could be best to cover our solar panels in that way. That means also parts of the ocean, correct. Also pieces of the desert, but not every part, because some of the oceans are actually quite, say, not completely oriented to the highest optimization. So if you try to maximize with new techniques, you get a more nuanced map, which this shows. And then I can continue also in terms of types of agriculture, how that will, how to position that. And if you crossbreed that with optimized agricultural techniques and forestry techniques, then you get also intenser forests to do that and agricultural fields to do that. That leads to another kind of map, which finally can provide more place for people in a way, for consumption at that moment, while keeping an optimized say climatic condition. We can grow at that moment to more than say 60 billion people if we do it in this way. With another kind of say situation in Europe, how you would do that with their role, how you would do it in the US with their role, and how say the Middle East would look like, and in this United Nations operation of optimizing programmatic components over the planet. So what we can learn out of that is that simply this distribution or redistribution is not a bad tool to that. So there are, of course, two of these examples. So here you see about 64 planets that where these kind of hypotheses are now turned into an inventory. We call it the Planet Maker in the Y Factory to understand different kind of hypotheses to reshuffle our situation and to give it a direction, and probably a combination of them that will lead to this next situation. It was still my dream to show that, like here in Delft, these different say hypotheses in a way, and to discuss it with leaders or former leaders on Davos. This was a proposal for a Davos that didn't go on, with the World Economic Forum that didn't go on, to meet each other in these planets. In the meantime, I think on the level of architecture, there are a couple of components in our work that help to imagine this new composition, this new capacity. I think our studies on 3D cities explored in architecture like here for Jakarta or for Shenzhen allows to imagine that our stupid skyscrapers could do better in terms of ecology and sociology in its way. Our attempts to understand the potential of flying cars when they consume less energy would lead to also to kind of other three-dimensional compositions immediately. We don't need streets anymore, and we use the sky for that. There's another ingredient that I would like to mention. That's the study on porosity. What does it give to us, and how to make that? If you make here this test by Lego blocks to see what kind of patterns we can make out of that to breathe in our environment with, say, cooling aspects, with vegetation, and with meeting aspects, and what are the advantage for that? A third ingredient in the same moment that is taking part is, of course, to do that also for an enlargement for agriculture and forestry, so that that could be used as a kind of green dip within and on top of this porosity. And then I think we would have a new kind of Hong Kong, as I showed that in Domus last year. It was New York would look better at the moment. So it starts to imagine that here in Fifth Avenue, where the interior is connected to that is kind of the green environment could act as a kind of sponge. Also in Dubai, I could imagine that done in another way. Good is to calculate, and in this case, when we do it on all the flat roofs of the planet, these are some of the test results that we have. Basically, you would compensate 1 degree Celsius in this, which I think at the moment as we speak, I mean, the 15th anniversary of Dezeen shakes hands with the new climate conference in Glasgow. So that makes also that there could be an addressing of a certain percentage of the temperature raise by this activity. What we need is not only these plants, but also to combine that with food. And I still remember our plea for big city ecological farming higher up in a way a while ago, but also to calculate how much that would mean in terms of the complete food dimensions, if you apply that on the Netherlands in this case, or in Manhattan, how much space that would need and how to incorporate that in our designs of the next future. That bundle leads to the sponge, I would say. A sponge which is where buildings actually become new landscapes. and where which can breathe, which can adapt, we can adopt, which can create food, which can create water, which can make sweet water, which can keep it for a while, can store it, and which can go ahead with living together. I'll give you some graphs of say some of the processes that are taking place to make that more believable. So a detail of the graphs of KM3 is now what I would say is KM4 going to be. And I show you some of those potentials, and some of them are silly, and others I think are wise. Here, of course, the mycotexture is one of them. Mushrooms, in its widest sense, can petrify and can lead into building material that can adopt and adapt itself. In the coming, say, 200 years, so on the longer term of Dezeen, we can imagine this sequence of inventions of the mushroom sector to make it more applicable as such. And in the shorter term, yes, with different kind of nurturing systems, we can already imagine this kind of mushrooms as building material composition. That would lead to another section of Rotterdam, how that would change over time, where gradually our environments can say grow and can take another kind of section of a city and grow and touch each other and span and create the kind of shadow on the places. Same with algae. I mean, it's highly discussed at the moment. Is if it works in its way, but it's more than algae. What we have to see, it's actually a giant, say, zone of energy production and of that can be plant oriented, and that can be combined with that, say, even with the mushrooms or even with the other aspects that I will talk about. And also, then you would see that our facades will change. That by thickening the algae production, our facades will thicken and will touch each other, and that I get this kind of, or some say, nightmare. The self-healing component, which is within biology embedded in most of the elements, as we see also with the current, say, COVID crisis in the end, is also that can be applied with petrification, say with concrete or new kind of concrete. That also here a series of options that go across, and that, but I will not go into detail of that. That will help to transform the current petrification process into a recyclable, usable, say, method in a much more of petrification, I would call it. And also then our current concrete structures would transform into temperate situations, which lead to this kind of, say, almost hippie dreams that I could imagine then over the planet. Pockets that can do that. Breathing is an important element in this new, say, composition of materials and new ecosystem that we could imagine. Also here in the pneumatic facade technology, you see different tests to combine landscape bubbles with breathing aspect, so that gradually also here this breathing will lead to accommodation of this package of plantation and biological material. If we do that and combine that with this printing techniques that you can see in some of the manifestos all around it, and you see what is going on already in the coming 15 years, and anticipate of the 220 years, then that could be one of the ways of absorbing and these materials, and by reusing it and turn it into unexpected, say, combinations like these students are showing. Last but not least, also in the plant sector, more and more tests are made that our, say, willows can grow quicker, can mitigate with neighbors, can turn it into petrifications, and can also loosen themselves due to certain kind of cellular processes that are made by electricity and water. So that would mean that also here we start. I mean, Stefano already started in Milano in a nice way, but I think the next step will be much more, say, then more integrated, and leads to this potential temporary plantations, which combine then all these aspects into one goal. And with that, I think we have another kind of planet to see in the nearby future. If our spaceship goes around, and maybe from blue it becomes more green, is what it wants to share. And then we have made a new kind of skin around the planet, both deepening the crust as enlarging the crust that helps us to shelter and help us to more, say, sustainable as such. With that, I give the word back to you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Winy. So the sponge is the proposal that you put forward as your manifesto, but clearly this idea, do you want to unshare your screen quickly, by the way? Clearly this idea of the sponge is the culmination of previous strands of research that you've been carrying out. Is this an ongoing process, and how long has your team been working on these kind of ideas?
I'm pretty aware, and that ideas that we give to the planet are complex and big. So you need they need to be covered by more issues in order to make it successful in the end. So that's why I also show the components of this, and it is, yeah, I think KM3 was already. And so the first intentions to think about the spaceship Earth, we're talking about 2004. So that's like, it was 16, 17 years ago. And the studies of 3D City that afterwards that were done the last 10 years in the Y Factory. And in the last 2 years, we try to bring them together with this say specific knowledges that we explore in different institutes and collaborate with different, say, engineers or bioengineers to imagine as the kind of hypothetical world out of that, and that creates this sponge.
And for anyone who doesn't know what the Y Factory is, can you quickly explain what that is?
Well, the Y Factory is a think tank and a research group based in at the Technical University of Delft. It makes master education for students from the Netherlands, but everywhere in a way, and concentrates on hypothesis of the future city and the future world, and that is where different, say, mini researches are done to emphasize certain aspects of what this future will look like, and try to combine it currently with a sponge project into a kind of synthesis.
So this research, how much of it is purely theoretical and how much of it has a practical use? Do the ideas that come out of the Y Factory in this research make their way into MVRDV buildings, or will they in future?
Some of them. I think the combination of plantation and building is more and more under production, and for better and for worse, with many tests. Also one in London, but the currently, of course, the depot does it then again deeper and uses, I think, this inventory that you will see in the Green Dip publication, where all major species of the world are, say, investigated with more universities on how much they need and how much they give, and what kind of conditions they need, and what they then ultimately how to position that or integrate that in the built environment in a three-dimensional say composition. So that, say, format we use now to practice it and to test it on different locations, and then in a way that is not only balconies that do the work or the job, like in Stefano's case, but also the terraces, also the walls themselves, or also the stacking of elements of the bigger entities themselves. And we do that in a couple of buildings, like today at the depot, and like in 2 months in the valley in Amsterdam, but also in other climates, like a new building in Shenzhen that will come up and test, and basically how that can resist also typhoons, for instance, to do that. So some people say it's vulnerable. Yes, true, but the planet is vulnerable, and some people say it needs maintenance. Yes, but without maintenance, no care, no love, and no future. So it's does it take a while to resist such a kind of critiques and criticism? Yes, and my stubbornness is hopefully continuing in that way.
I think everyone's understanding of climate change has got so much deeper recently, and particularly the contribution of things like concrete and steel to climate change. Really, if you think about it, they're terrible materials for the climate. They're fantastic. They look fantastic, but they make fantastic buildings, but in a sort of spaceship Earth context, they're terrible. Are you advocating that we move away from those kind of materials towards this kind of more bio-based construction? And do you think that that's going to be something that other architects are going to be willing to do?
I think for sure, honestly, it takes maybe some disasters before it's really happening. And on the other hand, it is a process which has more. You can make the now wooden buildings of 3 stories high and also now 70-meter high elements, still with a concrete core. In that case, we do it. On the other hand, the wood production is very vulnerable, as we see, and cannot deal with that. It also cannot completely deal yet with density in this wood production as such, or the wood building industry. And there, concrete and steel play still a very important role to manage that. So this transformation to lead to another kind of not only building material but also cityscape that comes out of that needs to be shaped. That needs to be helped also with other processes. And I think for the moment we need the countrysides for farming. But in a while, if we don't intensify our farming in 3-dimensional matters, and if we don't change our diets and as well as our products, our farming products, then if we don't do that, then we have not enough space to do it. If we don't say keep our water longer in more places, which we need the giant surfaces and we do that not more in a more compact way and more integrated way with that intensified farming, intensified forestry, then we cannot solve it either. So there are more elements that have to come together in order to make that belief in a fully bio-based city come true in that way. Anything helps. That's fair, Marcus. That is so, and I'm glad that so many people are working on it in its way. I also know that current, say, economics do not allow sometimes for it. I mean, our economy for a moment is based on concrete and steel production, and floor plans that are optimized based on that. So changing that would costs more still, despite what some people say. And but on the other hand, always we have a margin, I would say, of 8% in our building budgets, which we can use for something to do that. And on the other hand, I do hope that the studies in a kind of more ecological economy, that's the other part, how to make a kind of economy that can allow for that, or that wants to do that, or what are the ingredients for that, will also step by step encourage this kind of 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8%. And then we can tackle, I think, more the massive component of this operation.
How much power do you think architects have? I mean, some architects say, well, look, if our clients don't want to do it, if regulations don't encourage us to do it, we have no power. What do you think about that attitude?
I think the 8% rule also already says something. There is every architect works with a margin and can dedicate that margin to something. And I know the shopping list for that something is big, because we need I can maybe solve the water cycling system in a building that filters itself endlessly and that stores the water more, like we do in the depot. That is one thing, but then I cannot do the wooden structure at the moment, etc. So there's that already is we can do that. I actually think even that when we use it for a specific item, then we can show it also clearly. I think that gives actually more profit in terms of in evolutionary terms than to try to minimize or mix it everything. So that could be already a first step for everybody to do. The other thing, what I think architects can do is that they can be more aware that most of our problems have a spatial component. And I put it more on the level of urbanism than on the level of architecture, I know. If we talk about like the division between rich and poor, I think that has a strong spatial component to blend that somehow in and to plead for mixage, even when clients say that costs an extra lift again, my 8% can allow for an extra lift in that case. If we think about climate change, that has a tremendous spatial dimension in terms of how much extra water do we need, how much forestry do we need in order to cool down this planet, how much, say, agriculture do we need in terms of an ecological type of agriculture to do that, and how much cityscape do we need if we want to do it in a lighter way ultimately, or in a biological way. So to show that and to calculate that in both directions is also a task. I think our architects should do both in that way, and they can show it to clients. And if the client says, I'm not responsible for that, which might happen at the case, yeah, that is it is more and more we have to repeat, as if we are in a kind of children class, and to say it again. This process started at the Club of Rome already, and we are now 40 years later of it, and that's Greta has to warn us again after this time, indicates that this repetition factor is there. So you can say as an architect, yeah, my client doesn't want it, but the yes but is also a very strong element. You don't make yourself believable if you don't give that kind of things a position. And sometimes it's also okay to lose a competition, or to lose a commission because you cannot fulfill that. I'll give you one example. When we were asked to work on the Gazprom building, headquarter building in Petersburg, and you, for better and for worse, do you accept such a commission? Also, is a question in these days. And we try to do it. We only want to do it when this building is completely autarkic in terms of energy, even in St. Petersburg, when it's completely made out of their own forests, so in wood, and when also it is completely open so that everybody can enter and that history is not touched below it at the way. The funny thing is that we went to the last two and then were killed by some of the leadership in Russia on this matter. Okay, that's the state of the art, and maybe you have to fire then some people in the office because of that we didn't win. But there is this road to the future is not a direct road, and is a bumpy one, and it's a better. And I do hope that many architects try to find a way with that, and also make it more explicit in their task to do that. At the moment, we have an exhibition in the NAI, or that new institute here in Rotterdam, that starts in 2 days from now, the opening in 2 days, where we also look at ourselves. How good is MVRDV? How good are we in that way? And try to show tools like the carbon calculator that we just made, in order to give our work also a position over time. And it's this kind of alerts or that we could put on ourselves and make it more transparent. And of course there will be architects that hide it, and of course there will be greenwashers in that way, and demands for more clarity, and obviously the demands for extra laws. I think an architect can, for instance, also change the law. As we speak in the Netherlands, we try to change the building code to say that per definition we have to make heavy roofs. So very small rule, let's say, like in Switzerland, when you have snow, you have to add some extra. The roof has to allow for weight. That in the Netherlands is all lightweight roofs in that way. But if we want to use and want to combine our houses and our environments with surplus on the place, with energy demands, with water demands, with biology and biodiversity, then the roof is one of the most important elements to do that. And then we have to force a law for that, so that the weight, that it can handle the weight in its aspect. So extra small shakes hand with extra large is what we have learned. I mean, I love the book of Rem a long time ago, and I think we go now to XXS, the biological component, and XXL is what we are facing, and that's what your Dezeen 15 enterprise is about, to combine these two, according to me, to to share actually with all your readers and all your writers, and also your articles, which span from XXS to XXL, to give that basically like a structure. That's what I try to do.
Just to be clear about this 8% concept, is that 8% of the building cost, or is that 8% of your fee? Is it the margin you have within the fee, or is it?
I'm happy that's of the building cost. If it's in my fee, then we end up with 0.8%. So that is no. That's to say within the possible building cost, actually investment costs, to be honest, to make specify it more clearly. I think the investment cost, there's a lot of margins. The discussion on margins are not in every place in the world the same. So what I see a tendency in Northwest Europe to open up the discussion on margins, which where basically there is profit, but how much profit is and then if you calculate the difference by say margins in certain countries, sometimes in Russia there are margins up to 200%. Come on, and you compare it with what is considered more and more in the Netherlands or in Denmark as a reasonable margin. When you do it on a macro economical way, then you can between 4 and 8% is a package that somewhere there you could find. Well, there's a difference of 192% that could be spent on this. Some people, I wonder if there's another name for such a kind of economy that we are trying to imagine on that base to pay off this situation. And I still love that say between communism and capitalism, I hope to have a kind of comocracy, not a democracy, but a comocracy that allows for such a kind of combi. Finally, you can see that in certain countries that there's a voluntary wish of reducing that margin and to span that with new kind of tax systems on it. And other countries have giant discussions, let's say the US, on this. And then you see also Xi Jinping saying and raising the point that the tech industries in China could help a little bit the middle class by reducing their margins, basically in another way of forcing that, obviously. But so you see will and ultimately necessities to do that. So, and how to force those necessities, disasters, yeah, but for better and for worse, will do that sometimes.
And finally, Winnie, these ideas that you've been working on over the years, and this idea of the sponge, do you get to share these ideas with decision makers, with lawmakers, with politicians, and do they understand, or do they just think you're crazy? Will these ideas have some kind of traction, do you think?
That's why I presented it in this way, because on one hand we need also you need to look further than 15 years. And so the crazy dreams are needed. And there was a big culture of craziness, say in the 60s within architecture to imagine that. But I'm very aware that, say, the short term part of it is needed to convince politicians, and politicians have a lifespan of 4 years. Come on, so that you'd have to do already on the short term. So I think in this case, like the extra, say, law on heavier roofs, the heavy roofs law in the Netherlands is a 4-year plan to do that, to have it then worked out for the new buildings and the repair of buildings that are going to happen. Oh, then you need another 12 years to do that, and then just in your time frame to have that part of that operation in that way. If I want to stimulate the agricultural science that is needed, then I have to exaggerate. Then I have to show this vertical farming. Then I have to show how a mixed farming is needed, but is already happening now. The mixed farming and the pixel farming, and to that research, and have to ask them how can that also be combined with our building industry. So these visions help then at that moment to make first steps. You don't show them always, and sometimes you show them, especially in the research field to address potential, say, demands to the research industry of both in biology as in microbiology. These are elements that can here say our space design can help to address the agenda of that kind of research and of that part of industry. And I think that's also a task that we have to do and that our universities have to do much stronger than they do now.
I think that's a fantastic point to end on. Winy, thank you so much. I take your point that 15 years isn't long enough. You've excelled the brief and given us a 250-year view of what we need to do. Thank you so much, Winy, and thanks for taking time out of your busy day to speak to us and share your vision.
I wish you an incredible future and that Dezeen might last 250 years to witness this.
I hope so too.